Good evening, everyone. Welcome to tonight's council meeting for Monday the 8th of October. If we could all please stand for the opening prayer and acknowledgement. Lord, we ask that you guide us in our decision-making, protect us in the community we serve from all that is evil, and strengthen our unity for the welfare of the city. Amen. Amen. I would like to acknowledge the Wiradjuri people as the traditional custodians of the land that we meet upon today, and pay my respects to the elders, both past, present and future, for they hold the memories, culture, tradition and hopes of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people that contribute to our community. Thank you. Recording and webcasting of the meeting, CM2. This council meeting is being webcast and recorded. By speaking at this council meeting, you agree to being recorded and webcast. Please ensure that if and when you are speaking at this council meeting that you are respectful to other people and use appropriate language. AlburyCity accepts no liability for any defamatory or offensive remarks or gestures made during the course of this council meeting. An audio recording will be made for administrative purposes. Conflict of interest declarations received by the Chair and disclosure of political donations. I have not been made aware of any at all. Mr Zachnich, disclosure of political donations, thanks.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This advice to the council meeting relates to the Environmental Planning and Assessment Act 1979. Section 147 requires a person submitting planning applications or submissions regarding a planning application to disclose any reportable political donation and or gifts to any local councillor or employee of council. Reportable political donations include those of or above $1,000. The disclosure statement forms are available on the council's website or from the Customer Service Centre and must be lodged in accordance with the Act. In dealing with development applications, councillors need to take into account specific matters contained in the Environmental Planning and Assessment Act 1979. Accordingly, the provisions of Section 79C1 of that Act are set out in the Council Officer's report detailing issues to be considered. The Local Government Act 1993, Section 375A requires that a division be called whenever a motion for a planning decision is put at a meeting of the Council. Planning decision means a decision made in the exercise of a function of Council under the Environmental Planning and Assessment Act, including a decision relating to a development application, an environmental planning instrument, a development control plan or a development contribution plan under that Act, but not including the making of an order under Division 2A of Part 6 of that Act. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Mr Zachnich. Apologies. Thank you, Councillor Doxey.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I move the recommendation the Council receive, note and accept the apology of Councillor Van der Ven and grant leave of absence for the meeting.
Thank you. Councillor Stutchbury.
Second that, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Happy to put that. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. CM5, the Merrill Minute, there isn't. CM6, Action Plans 6.1 to 6.4. Councillor Thurley.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I move that the following action plans be received and noted. Actions complete for noting only, actions in progress and long-term issues more than 3 months. And I do have a question that I'd like to ask.
Thank you. Councillor Gleichen.
Very happy to second Councillor Thurley's recommendation as a motion.
Thank you. Councillor Thurley, being the mover, did you wish to ask that question before we move?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. It relates once again to the T Corp investment exposure limits and the implications for our council. We had written a letter to T Corp, but the action item says that no response has yet been received. I just wonder if Mr Finlayson might give us some update if he has anything.
Mr Finlayson.
Through you, Mr Mayor, following the preparation of the meeting agenda, a response has been received from the Office of Local Government, which will be distributed to councillors. Previously, AlburyCity has also received a response directly from T Corp. Following receipt of these responses, the General Manager has written to the Minister of Local Government seeking their leadership on this matter.
Councillor Thurley, do you have a follow-up?
No, that's fine, thank you.
Did you wish to open debate on this item?
No, I'm happy with the actions.
Thank you. Being no further question or debate, I have to put that motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. Confirmation of previous minutes, CM7. Thank you, councillors. Councillor Con.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I move that the minutes of the council meeting held on Monday the 24th of September 2018 at 6 p.m. be confirmed.
Thank you. Councillor Stutchbury.
Second that, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Con, did you wish to speak to that?
No, thank you.
No questions or debate. Happy to put that motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. Thank you. CM8, there are no reports from community forums. We have no notices of motion or rescissions. Presentations and deputations, CM 10.1. And I must actually welcome the Southern Sports Academy athletes in our midst here tonight, and it's great to see you all. And certainly we'll be hearing a presentation right now from the CEO, Mark Calvary. Mark, if you wish to come forward to the dais, thanks.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and to all councillors. On behalf of the Board of the Southern Sports Academy, I'd like to thank the City of Albury for taking the time to acknowledge the commitment and effort of the Albury-based athletes that are gathered here with us today. The Southern Sports Academy continues to provide young regional and remote pre-elite athletes with the pathways and development opportunities usually available only to their metropolitan counterparts. As you can see from the number of Sports Academy athletes here today that are residing in Albury, we have strong numbers again in 2018, with 12 scholarship holders from across our programs, as well as Craig Robinson on our coaching staff of the basketball program. Their efforts are certainly worth acknowledging. Over a 12-month period, the athletes come together at least once a month and some programs weekly. Throughout these programs, they're involved in workshops relating to topics such as leadership, sports psychology, strength and conditioning, nutrition, recovery and personal development. They're expected to follow their satellite training programs as directed by our Programs and Athletic Development Manager. And throughout all of this, they participate in high-level competition in their scholarship. As you can see, the athletes gathered here today are very committed and disciplined young residents who are great ambassadors to their region and a fine example for other young people to look up to. Quite obviously, they're also a credit to their respective families who sacrifice a great deal to ensure that their children can pursue their sporting dreams. The Academy is a not-for-profit organisation that relies heavily on funding provided by various government agencies, both local and state-based. We ensure that we hope that this funding can continue to provide opportunities for our athletes and ensure that we can invest in technologies and resources required for greater sporting pathways for our regional athletes. With this in mind, and on behalf of all of the Academy, I'd sincerely like to thank the City of Albury for their continued financial support towards our programs. I'd now like to call upon Georgia Payne, who's going to come up and with a short presentation to the Mayor.
Thanks, Mark.
On behalf of all Southern Sports Academy athletes based in Albury, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the Mayor, Councillor Kevin Mack and all the councillors of AlburyCity for your generous financial contribution and continued support for the Academy and the work it does for regional athlete pathways. Without your support, we would not have this fantastic opportunity to develop both in our sporting and personal pursuits.
Thanks, Mark. I just thought someone might have a question for you, but any questions, councillors? No questions? You'd have one, Councillor Glacken? Question? Yep.
Thank you. Through you, Mr Mayor, can I have two questions. One is, could we please hear the ages and the sports that each of these athletes are in? And my next, and also the township that you come from, if it's Albury or just outside of Albury, etc. And could I also ask through you my understanding is that the New South Wales government has recently increased the funding to the program. Can I confirm that that is correct, or has that not filtered?
Yeah, just over 12 months ago, we had a review of our funding agreement, which we did have increased funding, which was fantastic. We still would like some way to go with that. We've developed amongst the regional academies a RASI network, a business case that is to go to state government for a review of that funding agreement moving forward.
All right, thank you. I'd heard it had been the same for 6 or more years, and then it's just gone up again. So that's good. Thank you.
Which has been fantastic for us and allowed us to provide further services for the athletes, namely the employment of an additional staff member to provide services for those kids.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. And if we could just have a summary of the ages and the sports.
If we could just come up.
Maybe even the schools as well as the townships.
I think that'd be great if each
bring them forward.
young person could stand up. School, age and sport. Here we go.
I'm 15. I'm in the basketball program and I go to Albury High.
And your name?
Mitchell Houlihan.
Thanks, Mitch.
I go to Albury High. I'm 14. I'm in the basketball program.
And you are?
Lily.
Lily McCullum. Thank you, from Tabletop.
I go to Trinity. I'm in the basketball program. I'm great.
I'm Harry. I'm in the rugby program. I'm 16 and I go to Trinity.
My name's Amy. I'm in the netball program. I'm 16 and I go to Xavier.
I'm Amy. I'm 14. I go to Albury High and I'm in the basketball program.
I'm Isaac. I'm 15. I'm in the basketball program and I go to Xavier.
I'm Richie and I'm 15 and then I play rugby and I go to Scots.
Georgia, 16, in the golf program and Albury High School.
And I'm Laura. I'm 16. I go to Jamestown High School and I'm in the golf program as well.
Golf. Okay. All right. Thank you for that.
Just one question, Mark, in relation to the program. Last year at the dinner, Albury had a fairly big representation in what sport was that? And they were away at a tournament and they weren't able to get to the dinner.
I'm trying to remember the sport program.
Was that water polo or basketball?
Yes, it would have been our water polo program. So this year we haven't run a water polo program for a number of reasons, and those programs are reviewed annually. Next year I think we'll probably see the numbers from Albury fluctuate again due to the fact that we now run an AFLW program, or a girls AFL program that started this year. Under this year's model, the AFL were also running their own program out of Albury. Next year the Southern Sports Academy will take in that program and run as one model. So we anticipate there'll be a number of more athletes coming from this region in that girls AFL program.
So a lot of the guidance for your programming is divided amongst what you do and what you get funded for, by the sound of it?
Yeah, so we're primarily funded by state government, but we also have written agreements with the state sporting organisations. They provide some funding, but also services towards those programs, and then we look for commercial partnerships towards the programs as well to hopefully reduce the cost on our athletes.
So an athlete attending the program, how often do they travel to Wagga for the training?
It varies on the program. So majority of the programs meet monthly, and we try to do a lot of our work remotely. But our AFL girls program, for instance, they do meet weekly. It can depend on the sport and sometimes the culture within that sport and how used they are to travelling.
Okay, thank you, and thanks again. And I believe you've got a dinner coming up, have you not?
Yeah, Friday week.
Friday week.
We have our presentation evening.
Yeah.
And we also have a parliamentary reception in the week leading into there as well.
And how many athletes have you got in the program now?
Just over 120 in the program.
Oh, good.
Across 8 different sports. And we'll look to have a new sport joining us next year as well.
Well, thanks, Mark, and thanks to the young people and their parents coming in tonight. It's much appreciated, and it's certainly a worthwhile venture for the young people, and certainly we'll do whatever we can to make that happen.
Thank you very much.
Thank you again.
Thanks for your time.
Just for council's information, there are actually 6 from Albury postcode, 4 from Tabletop, 1 from Thagoon and 1 from Lavington in the Sports Academy. Okay, so if you guys wanted to leave before we launch into the rest of the meeting, you're more than happy to go right now if you like. I don't want to hold you up, and I know you probably don't want to sit there all night. Thank you, councillors. CM11, the reports and minutes of committees and working parties. CM11.1, minutes of the Floodplain Risk Management Committee meeting held on Thursday the 20th September. Councillor Thurley.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I move the minutes and recommendations of the Floodplain Risk Management Committee meeting held on 20th September be received, noted and accepted.
Thank you. Councillor Doxey.
Happy to second, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Thurley, do you wish to speak to that at all?
I think it was a relatively simple meeting.
Thank you. I'm happy to put that. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. CM12 of documents for sealing. Thank you. Councillor Glacken.
Thank you. Through you, Mr Mayor, to move the recommendation as a motion that Council authorises its seal to be affixed to the documents outlined below in the presence of 2 signatories authorised to affix the seal pursuant to Regulation 400 of the Local Government General Regulation 2005 and the Council seal and management of legal documents and advice procedure. A certificate of authority under the Swimming Pools Act for Lauren Angel, Development Compliance Officer, due to a change in position.
Thank you. Councillor Stutchbury.
Second that, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Glacken, do you wish to speak to that at all?
No, thank you.
Happy to put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. The officers' reports and consideration 13.1. Councillor Thurley, Albury Waste Management Centre.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I just alert councillors this motion is slightly different than the one that was in our business papers. So I move that A, council not accept the tender for contract number 16/01676, Albury Waste Management Centre Workshop Wash Bay. B, not invite fresh tenders, as from the evidence obtained from prospective tenderers, with the quantum of work currently in the market, there is limited resources available, and inviting fresh tenders at this time is unlikely to secure further or competitive bids. C, determined to enter into negotiations with Ultra Project Services Proprietary Limited based on their initial tender submission, aligning with Council's engineering estimate, with the exception of 2 key trade items. D, authorise the General Manager to enter into negotiations with Ultra Project Services Proprietary Limited or any other party deemed to be competent to perform the works required for the project, with a view to entering into a contract for the construction of the Albury Waste Management Centre Workshop Wash Bay in accordance with Section 178 of the Local Government General Regulation 2005, and E, provide a further report to Council prior to signing any contract mentioned in D above.
Thank you. Councillor Glacken.
I'm happy to second that, and I have a question.
Okay. Councillor Thurley, you comfortable if we take the question first before we open debate?
Mr Mayor.
Councillor Glacken, question?
Thank you. Through you to the most relevant member of staff, I'd like to ask about the legality of D and E. I don't think E is really such a problem, but item D, that we would be able to reintroduce other potential would-be tenderers or quoters. Thank you.
Mr Sacknage.
Yes, thanks for the question, through you, Mr Mayor. That's the case, Councillor Glacken. Those provisions are in the Act as they relate to not accepting a tender and alternative courses of action for the council to undertake. So that's in accordance with the legislation.
Thank you very much.
Have another question, Councillor Thurley. Councillor King.
Through you, Mr Mayor, the relevant member of staff. What's stopping the council actually project managing it and engaging various trades to do components of this work, not as a whole?
Mr Sacknage.
Well, thanks for the question, through you, Mr Mayor. The components are specialised. There's no reason why council couldn't project manage. But what I'd suggest is that if council were to adopt this resolution, we go through that process of negotiating. If that's not a positive outcome, then that's an alternative, further alternative we could consider, and we'd need to report that again back to council for determination as a next step if item D doesn't give us the outcome that we're after.
Councillor King.
No more follow-up.
Councillor Stutchbury, you have a question?
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. Through you to the most relevant person. It's a little unclear to me how, if we're not inviting fresh tenders, we are going to find any other party deemed to be competent. Could it be explained to me how that might come about?
Mr Zachnich.
Thanks for the question. Through you, Mr Mayor. So there are a number other potential contractors or providers we could talk to that haven't tendered in terms of this round of tendering, that we would approach in a provider sense. The process we go through with an open tendering is to draw those out, as explained in the report. That hasn't resulted in a number of tenderers coming forward, but we'd look to certainly commence the conversation with the tenderer that has been submitted, and then others that are on council's provider list in a either program or project specific basis at this stage. So that would elicit the sort of further estimates or negotiations we'd be seeking.
Councillor Thurley, just open debate on this item.
Yes, I'll proceed any debate by just two questions. The issue with the tendered price from Ultra Project Services was significantly higher than our budget estimate, and it was mentioned that there were two specific trade matters. I wonder if I could ask the relevant member of staff what those matters were.
Mr Ferris.
Through you, Mr Mayor, the two trades that were inconsistent with our engineering estimate was the roof structure and the hydraulic services. So we would look to seek clarification from Ultra Services about their understanding of the scope there, just to be sure that there's no misalignment there.
Councillor Thurley, you have another question?
Oh, that's fine.
Yep. Open debate.
Yeah, look, the reason I changed the motion was that the tendered price is significantly higher than the budgeted estimate, and there were some concerns that the tenderers had not completely understood the scope of work or the nature of the work, and so I'm quite comfortable under section 1783 of the local government regulation that D entitles us to go back and the General Manager to talk to Ultra Project Services, but it also entitles him to talk to any party. And given that we have a number of projects of all shapes, sizes and scope, he could look at anyone who's previously worked for council and done jobs, and if the end contract needs to be split between Ultra Project and other parties, that's fine. I added E because there's some concern that we were way above the project budget, so prior to signing any contract, I would rather the General Manager come back to advise us of what he's achieved during negotiation. But I'm not, I don't think there's any major problem. The report was already A, B, C and most of D. I've added two minor amendments.
Thank you. No speakers against. Councillor Gleichen, you wish to speak for?
No, that's fine if there's no speakers against.
Okay. There being no further speakers for or against, I'm happy to put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. Thank you, councillors. CM 13.2, proposed transfer of land, Kerr Road, Thaguna. Thank you, councillors. Councillor Gleichen.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. To move the recommendation as a motion, that council approve to transfer lots 1 and 2 DP 1219904 to the owners of lot 3 DP 1146205 and any documents required to transfer lot 3 DP 1219904 to the owners of lot 2 DP 1007790. B, hereby authorise its seal to be affixed to any documents required to, in the presence of two signatories authorised to affix the seal pursuant to Regulation 400 of the Local Government General Regulation 2005 and the Legal Document Management Procedure, and C, meet all reasonable costs to enable the transfers endorsed in Recommendation A and B. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Stutchbury.
Second that, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Glacken, did you wish to open debate on that item?
No, Mr Mayor, it's simply a tidying up and an enabling administrative function. Thank you.
Thank you. Just one question probably to the General Manager. In terms of this legal cost to transfer this small parcel of land, is there any understanding what that might be?
Mr Ferris might be able to give us an estimate.
Mr Ferris?
Yeah, Mr Mayor, I'd need to take that on notice, but it would be a very small amount, so probably my estimate would be $2,000 to $3,000, something like that. It wouldn't be a large, it'd be purely legal, and having it then brought into the adjoined with the existing properties.
It's a lot of money for $182 worth of land, isn't it? Okay, thank you. Being no further question or debate, happy to put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. CM 13.3, Albury-Wodonga Regional Economic Development Strategy. Councillor Con.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm moving an alternate motion that Council defer consideration of the Albury-Wodonga Regional Economic Development Strategy until its meeting of the 29th of October.
Thank you. Councillor Thurley.
I second the motion, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Con, do you wish to open debate on your motion?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm sure councillors are curious as to my reasons for deferring. To be honest, the executive summary that we were provided with is one of the worst reports I've ever read. I'm really relieved that that was commissioned by the state government and not by us. But to be honest, industries were ranked according to terms that weren't defined. It's really unclear what was actually done to come up with the strategic priorities that are identified. I was really pleased to see that key AlburyCity projects are listed as priorities in that document, like the Albury Entertainment Centre, Lauren Jackson Sports Centre, Wagira Trail, Wonga Wetlands. But I don't think that I feel comfortable signing off on this document without the supporting analysis. Mr Zatnich kindly obtained that document and forwarded that to me today, but that's not really enough time for us to consider it properly, and I just want another 2 weeks.
Thank you, Councillor Con. There being no questions or further debate, I'm happy to put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. 13.4, Draft Albury-Wodonga Destination Management Plan 2019 to 2023. Thank you, councillors. Councillor Glacken.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm just trying to find my page. I know it's on the screen. Yep. Okay. Mr Mayor, through you to move the recommendation as a motion that Council A adopt the Draft Albury-Wodonga Destination Management Plan 2019 to 23. B, place the Draft Albury-Wodonga Destination Management Plan 2019 to 23 on public exhibition for 28 days in accordance with the with Wodonga City Council. In conjunction with Wodonga City Council, and C, if no submissions are received during the public exhibition period, adopt the Draft Albury-Wodonga Destination Management Plan 2019-2023.
Thank you. Councillor Thurley.
Second the motion, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Glacken, do you wish to speak to that item?
Yes, if I may, Mr Mayor, very briefly. Albury and Wodonga have both put significant time and effort into towards enabling a destination plan for the two cities. There's been a long history of each city developing their own and trying to work in conjunction with each other. There's been a number of guises of cross-border amalgamated groups who have worked towards this as well. Clearly, the opportunity of the two cities working together to pursue and take this forward is absolutely fantastic. And we know that we have had significant success with visitor numbers over the last couple of years. We had a very high period a few years ago. It went down a little bit and it's got going back up again. We know that the work done by council in partnership with other organisations, both private and public, and also in collaboration with the state governments, does absolutely benefit our community as a wider community. It's not just the directly related tourism opportunities that benefit from this. We know that the spin-off from that work is immense and extremely, extremely significant in looking forward, and therefore I believe we should be adopting this destination management plan, or putting it out to consultation and then adopting this plan. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Gluckin. There being no further questions or debate, I'm happy to put that item. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. 13.5, Amendment to Development Control Plan. Thank you, councillors. Councillor Thurley.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I move that Council A receive and note the report, and B endorse the amendments to Appendix B, Development Notification Provisions of the Albury Development Control Plan 2010.
Thank you. Councillor Doxey.
Happy to second, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Thurley, just have one question before I open debate. Is that happy? Yep. Councillor Con.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I have a question through to the relevant member of staff, please. There's a comment on page 67 about exemptions for non-habitable buildings that should usually have to comply with flood-compatible materials and elevated electrical fixtures. The proposal is to have an exemption when the cost of damage is actually less than the cost of implementing the controls. I'm wondering if it's possible that this might have ramifications downstream to human health or the environment. My question is, have costs other than the financial cost of damage been considered in planning this exemption?
Mr Keys.
Through Mr Mayor, if I can just clarify, the exemption is for those other buildings not to be required to build above the flood planning level. So they can build in the floodplain if they're out of flood, if they're protected from flood damage, so flood-proof materials, and that all the electrical equipment is above the flood planning level. They can stay on the ground. They don't have to actually raise their floor levels up like normal dwellings in those locations do. That's the exemption that's being proposed.
Thanks, I'm happy with that clarification.
Thank you, Mr Keys. Councillor Thurley, just open debate on that item.
No, thank you, Mr Mayor. The report was thorough and clear in intent.
Given it's an amendment, we need a division. I'm happy to put the motion. All those in favour of Councillor Stutchbury, Councillor Doxey, Councillor Cameron, Councillor Mack, Councillor Con, Councillor King, Councillor Gluckin, Councillor Thurley. The motion is carried. Thank you, councillors. 13.6, the Draft Flying Fox Colony Management Plan. Thank you. Councillor Thurley.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I move that Council 1 endorse the draft Padman Park Leanies Bend Flying Fox Camp Management Plan. 2, place the draft Padman Park Leanies Bend Flying Fox Camp Management Plan on public exhibition for 28 days. And 3, if no submissions are received during the public exhibition period, adopt the draft Padman Park Leanies Bend Flying Fox Camp Management Plan.
Thank you. Councillor Stutchbury.
I'll enthusiastically second that, Mr Mayor.
Didn't
get the button in time.
Councillor Thurley, just to open debate on that flying issue.
No, look, this is a good outcome from what was once quite a problem situation in Albury, and it's to be commended.
Thank you. I have a speaker against. Councillor Cameron.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. It is my personal opinion that council is taking the wrong track with these filthy Larissa carrying thieves of fruit. We should be applying for permits to destroy the rotten things. It is unbelievable to me that they are classed as in any way threatened when they're in such abundance in New South Wales and Australia generally.
Thank you, Councillor Cameron. I have a question from Councillor Gluckin. Councillor Gluckin?
Yes, through you, Mr Mayor, to the most relevant member of staff. I have a little sympathy with the issues of the health factor. And so I'd like to ask, how at risk are these flying fox? And what is the future of this colony? Will they grow to plague proportions? And what is the longer term? I'm comfortable with the short term, containing them where they are, but what is the longer term reality for this group who may continue to breed and clearly would need to take up more space, or are they pretty stable? Will they not necessarily continue to increase their numbers?
Ms. Code.
Thank you for the question. Through you, Mr. Mayor. The current population has remained at about 2,000 for the past 3 years. It is consistent with the vegetation that is there. So they're unlikely to get larger because it's all about how much food and vegetation they have. We can't predict the long-term effect of what their growth is going to be, but we're pretty confident, as you can be, that it should remain fairly stable.
Okay. Yeah.
Initial question of, and thank you for the more detailed answer for my more detailed second question. The first question was also about how at risk are these animals really in Australia? I know they're meant to be at risk, but I'm not confident that they really are. I think there's an enormous number of them.
Ms. Code.
Through you, Mr. Chair, thank you for the question. The grey-headed flying fox is considered vulnerable. Their population is actually decreasing by about 20%. It just appears that there's more of them because they've come to urban areas because of destruction of their habitat, because of building and infrastructure work, so they move to areas which are more populated, so they're more visible. But statistically, from what we've been told by the relevant authorities, they are decreasing in numbers and they are considered vulnerable and threatened.
Yep.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. My follow-up question is, whilst this is a good short to medium-term location for them, should we really be looking at finding an even better longer-term location? I know it took considerable effort to move them a few hundred metres, but is it possible to look for an even better longer-term solution?
Ms. Code.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, thank you for the question. The current location is considered ideal in that it is sort of secluded, it's contained, it's not easily accessible unless people deliberately wander down into that area. In terms of moving a camp, which is what they're called, of flying foxes to another area, that's challenging. You can't direct them as such. So this currently is considered to be a pretty ideal location.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Code. Now, Councillor Thurley, do you wish to speak for open debate on this item?
I think all that needs to be said has been said. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Councillor Con, do you wish to speak for this item?
Only briefly, Mr. Mayor, to commend the report. I think this is one of those fantastic occasions where the best outcome for human health and public amenity is the best outcome environmentally as well. I run along the Wigira Trail and see this colony on a regular basis, and it's beautiful to see our native wildlife in a place that's appropriate for them, so well done.
Thank you. On that note, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. You like your vote recorded. Councillor Cameron, that you're against the motion. Thank you, councillors. Okay, CM 13.7, LG New South Wales assistance with legal costs. Councillor Con.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move noting that this is different to the recommendation in the business papers, that Council does not support the request from Local Government New South Wales for $3,501.21 as Albury City's voluntary contribution towards the legal assistance sought by the City of Sydney, Bayside City Council and North Sydney Council.
Thank you. Councillor Thurley.
Second that motion, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Con, do you wish to open debate, please?
Only briefly, Mr. Mayor, I don't think our community has a great interest in the legal battles from three very large Sydney councils, and probably wouldn't have an interest in us spending ratepayers' money on this.
Thank you. I have a speaker against. Councillor Cameron.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think the idea that we should not take an interest in this is insular and short-sighted in the extreme. It is a small amount of money that our contribution is, that that is being sought from us is a very small amount of money. We can well afford it, and the case law that will follow from this decision may well affect Albury City in the future and its residents. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a question. Councillor Glacken.
Thank you. Through you as the Chair to the most relevant member of staff. I note that the case involves the interpretation of the Local Government Act 1993, and it's with regards to the categorisation of rateable land as residential prior to necessarily being built on and lived in as a dwelling. What sort of implication may this not have for Albury City Council currently, and in say the medium term?
Mr. Keys.
Sorry, could I ask clarification on that again, please, Mr. Mayor? Just get the question repeated if I could.
Sure. So the case is about the rateable land and whether it's classified as.
Mr. Finlayson's probably interrupt.
Mr. Finlayson. Mr. Finlayson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for the question. As I understand it, the case is still subject to the outcome of the appeal process. But you are right in your question in terms of it's about the categorisation of land for rating purposes, and at what point in time does the categorisation change. So obviously that's dependent upon what's happening with each specific property and where it's starting from and where it's likely to move from. In terms of, from my perspective and staff's perspective, in terms of our processes, we don't see it as a significant change, whether it's to our processes or to, from a financial point of view. It is a matter of timing, probably not as significant as perhaps for some metropolitan city areas, but something we'd need to further assess. There could be impacts both on a positive and negative side for all parties involved, but still to be fully explored following the outcome of the appeals process.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Thurley, you speak for the motion.
I do, slightly different reasons than Councillor Con. Basically, the matter was decided, and then the three councils went to the Court of Appeal. The Court of Appeal heard the matter in late July and reserved its decision. So it would seem to me that if their decision was in favour of the councils, they might reverse the decision and award costs. And in that case, our contribution would not be required. I would rather at least leave this matter in abeyance and wait for the decision of the Court of Appeal. Whether I change my mind or not then is a different matter, but the matter is not finalised at this stage.
Thank you, Councillor Thurley. Councillor Doxey, you speak against.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I remember a couple of years ago, as some of the councillors will remember, we had a similar request to different councils, of course. But I think in this particular case, it's a small amount of money, as Councillor Cameron said, and you never know in the years to come. It could be us in the reverse role. I think the small amount of money is well worth it in this case. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Doxey. There appears to be no further questions or debate. Councillor Con, do you wish to close debate on this item?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. During the debate, I've managed to Google the City of Sydney's last income statement. In 2017, they had a net operating result positive of $143 million and a total income of $721 million. I don't think they need $3,000 from Albury City, and I'm sure our ratepayers would rather see us spend it on services for the community.
Thank you, Councillor Con. On that note, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? The motion is carried. Thank you, councillors. CM 13.8, election of the council representative of the Local Traffic Committee for 2018-19. Councillor Cameron.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move that council elect two representatives to the Local Traffic Committee, being Councillor Stutchbury and Councillor Doxey, and that Council B update the committees and working parties register to reflect this election.
Did you wish to nominate a substitute for either of those or not?
Look, I'll call for a substitute if either of those two gentlemen are not available.
Okay. I need a seconder. Councillor Stutchbury.
Second that motion, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Cameron, do you wish to open debate?
No, thank you, Mr Mayor, other than to remark that it's pretty obvious. We have two people interested. We have the capacity to easily appoint two people. It fits.
Thank you. Okay. There appears to be no further... we have a question. Councillor Glacken.
Thank you. I wasn't quite sure how to approach this. It's noted in the report that I was happy to remain as the substitute. So I'm therefore happy to be the substitute. So go down in the pecking order that if two delegates were unavailable, then I would happily be the substitute for both. But I don't think you would need a substitute.
For the substitute? Yeah. No, that's fine.
Mr Mayor, I'm happy to add a C to the motion if it's appropriate. Get advice from the staff. To nominate Councillor Glacken as the substitute for either of those two positions.
Yes,
if that be necessary.
We don't need a C covered by...
Thank you.
No, it's covered by A.
Two representatives and a substitute.
Good. Thank you.
So what's currently there, you elect Councillor Stutchman and Councillor Doxey with Councillor Glacken as a substitute to the Local Traffic Committee. And B, update the committee and working parties register to reflect the election. Councillor Con, you have a question?
I do. Through you to the relevant member of staff, please. I seem to recall in the last 2 years that we have had instances where more than one person has expressed interest in being our representative, and we have had an election and selected one person rather than expanding the pool. Is that correct?
Mr Zagnich.
Yes, thanks for the question, Mr Mayor. That is the case. I understand what Councillor Cameron is proposing is to move to two representatives, so two council reps on the traffic committee with a single substitute if one or other of those is unable to attend.
Comfortable with that? Okay. So I'm happy to put that motion. All those in favour? Any against? The motion is carried. Thank you. I'd like to confirm that the council representatives for the Local Traffic Committee for 18-19 are Councillors Doxey and Councillor Stutchbury, and the substitute is Councillor Glacken. Thank you, councillors. Okay. CM 14.1, the Annual Development Monitor 217-18. Thank you. Councillor Cameron.
I'd like to move that Council receive and note the report on the Albury Development Monitor 2017 to 2018.
Councillor Stutchbury.
Second that, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Cameron, do you wish to speak to that?
No, thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. There appears no questions or debate. Happy to put that motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. 14.2, disclosures by councillors, Audit and Risk Improvement Committee members and designated persons' returns. Councillor Glacken.
Thank you. Through you to move the recommendation that Council receive and note the report concerning the 2017-2018 disclosures of returns by Council's Audit, Risk and Improvement Committee members and designated persons, noting that these are in arrears.
Thank you. Councillor Thurley.
Second the motion, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Glacken, did you wish to speak to that?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Happy to put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. There are no delegates' reports for noting. I have several notices of urgent business. Councillor Con.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I just have one question, please, through to the relevant member of staff. I believe it was confirmed earlier today regarding the lane hire fees for the swimming clubs that the current offer from Aligned Leisure to the swimming clubs is a one-year contract that does not include any lane hire fees for this season. I just wanted to confirm that that's correct.
Mr Zagnich.
Yes, thanks for the question, through Mr Mayor. That is correct. Single-year hire agreement, nil hire charges up until beginning of July 2019.
Councillor Con, you comfortable with that?
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Stutchbury.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Unlike previous notices of urgent business. This one actually is urgent, and it relates to the sugar gliders. As we're all aware, sugar gliders are a threatened population, a threatened species in Thurgoona, and I read with concern in the newspaper on the weekend that down there in Tasmania they're going to start culling sugar gliders to save the swift parrot. And so I would like to propose that we, as a council, write to the relevant department in Tasmania and offer to rehabilitate those sugar gliders to Thurgoona.
Thank you, Councillor Stutchbury. Councillor, Mr Zacknich, did you have a response to that?
We might take that one on notice and follow up the detail if you like, and then respond to councillor. So we perhaps have more information about the detail there in terms of what's being proposed. We can report back to you on that.
Thank you, Councillor Cameron.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to ask a question through you to the most appropriate member of staff about the tender process for the regional aquatic facilities, which we entered into in April 23rd. In that process, or prior to that decision being made, and with the request for tender process, is it the case that each of the three tenderers, being Belgradia, YMCA and Aligned Leisure, were provided a schedule of fee and charges which showed that AlburyCity had a lane hire charge for the 3 previous years, or when I say previous, 17-18, 16-17 and 15-16?
Mr Zacknich.
Yep, thanks for the question, through you, Mr Mayor. Yes, that's the case, Councillor Cameron.
Can I further ask, Mr Mayor, through you to the most appropriate member of staff, during that tender process, were each of the 3 tenderers made aware that it had not been the custom and practice for the contractors to collect those lane fees from regular users in AlburyCity?
Mr Zacknich.
Yes, as I understand, that was the case through you, Councillor, through you, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Cameron.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to seek a further point of clarification, and it goes somewhat to it's in parallel to what Councillor Con asked. We've been following this with great interest, of course, and we hope that it can be resolved to everyone's satisfaction. But one of the impasses this week seemed to be a perception, rightly or wrongly, from the user groups that they were being asked to commit to a 5-year agreement. That is, if they signed up, that they would be bound by the proposed schedule of lane hire fees that Aligned Leisure were proposing for each of the next 4 years after this year. Is that not the case? Are Aligned Leisure currently, as of I think Thursday or Friday last week, is it the case that Aligned Leisure are proposing that there can be a 12-month agreement with further negotiation, or is any acceptance of their offer of 12 months freedom from charges contingent on agreeing to a schedule of charges for the next 4 years after that? I ask this because I've seen an email which suggests that no one's going to be locked into the volume that they reserve, which is a different question to accepting the lane hire fee, although it may be related.
Mr Zacknich.
Thanks for the question, through you, Mr Mayor. So the information we have from Aligned Leisure is just that, confirming, Councillor Cameron, that it is a 9-month agreement, a one-year agreement till end of June, early July 2019 at nil lane hire charge. One agreement, and annual agreements, as we understand it, where clubs are requested to provide their lane allocations for the coming year, and also obviously to upgrade or update their insurance and membership details on an annual basis. That's the process with an annual user agreement, as is detailed by Aligned Leisure. But from Aligned Leisure, they're saying that nothing is yet locked in from next year. So each of those forward or foreshadowed fee increases are still, and Aligned Leisure is still talking directly to the individual swimming and water polo clubs to work through that. And given the period of time, 9 months that is, before July next year, there's time to work through those issues one-on-one with the individual clubs, water and swimming clubs and users.
Thank you.
Comfortable? Are you done? Any more questions?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Con?
Thank you. Only briefly, Mr Mayor, not to do with the pool lane hire fees. Just noting with pleasure Councillor Stutchbury's newfound concern for the squirrel gliders. And if you'll let me quote from the australianmuseum.net.au website, squirrel gliders Petaurus norfolcensis are often mistaken for the more common sugar glider, Petaurus breviceps. Thanks.
Thank you for that clarification, Councillor Con. And on that squirrely note, I believe there's no confidential items, and we're done at 6:55 p.m. Thank you, councillors.